The following interview is with Mohammad Tariqul Islam. Mr. Islam is the country director for the anti-trafficking NGO Justice and Care in Bangladesh. He joins the Generation's senior researcher WHO in an interview on human trafficking in South Asia. This series is promoting the charity Tab for a Cause. If you're interested in supporting solutions to international issues with a simple Chrome extension, please click the link in the video description.
Hello, welcome everyone back to Worldview and our full version with Mohammad Islam, Country Director of Justice and Care, Bangladesh. We'll be asking Mohammad a series of questions on human trafficking. First of all, can you describe your work and what kind of challenges have you and your team faced?
Yeah, thank you. So, as I earlier mentioned, I work for Justice and Care in Bangladesh. So Justice and Care is primarily focused on cross-border human trafficking, though we work in trafficking in whole, but primary focus is trafficking across borders. We work in prevention, protection, prosecution, and of course we do the partnership with the governments to tackle the heinous crime. In prevention, we do a pilot program and targeted intervention. We have identified vulnerable families, and from which the families host vulnerable family members and who are vulnerable to trafficking. So we are supporting them with economic opportunities so that we can reduce the vulnerability. We're also engaging with the bordering communities, involving the border guards and police and locally elected bodies to raise awareness among the bordering communities that harboring of potential victim is a punishable offense under our Anti-Human Trafficking Act, which was enacted in 2012. We also work in protection, under which we rescue and repatriate victims, and we also do aftercare. So whenever a victim goes missing in a case, normally we work with the law enforcement agency. They refer cases to us, and if the victim is taken beyond the border, we work with our Indian counterparts to rescue that victims in wherever she is in India. And we then facilitate the repatriation of the victim, since we are the part of the bilateral repatriation process, and we bring her back, and then we support her rebuilding their life. And we hold her hand until she becomes a champion back into the community, and as long as it takes. And whatever it takes, in fact, to put her back in the mainstream of the life. We also partner with Minister of Home to expedite the prosecution process of the human trafficking cases now pending trial in the tribunals. So these are the things that we are now looking into, and we have a vision that we will also expand our focus to other destination areas, so that we can also be of help of the other victims who have been taken to other destination areas apart from India. We are also advocating with Minister of Homes so that we have a uniform standard operating procedure between Bangladesh and India. We're also advocating with the Minister of Home to establish implementation guideline for mutual legal assistance treaty that we have signed with India in 2011. So we are part of the National Anti-Human Trafficking Civil Society Group and even Technical Working Group. And what are some of the activities that we are doing here in Bangladesh.
That's great. Can you tell us about the characteristics that make a victim vulnerable to being targeted by traffickers?
So now everyone is vulnerable. So characteristics, it's a wide range of kind of characteristics that we can see now, like starting from the man to woman to child. So everyone is vulnerable to trafficking. But again, men who are aspirant migrant who want to go abroad for the purpose of work, and who comes of a poor family with a poor economic background, but still have ambitious and want to go abroad. So they fall prey, and the traffickers prey on them. Girls who are young, good looking, poorly educated, having poor economic condition back to the family, having a lot of sisters and brothers living in a bordering community, and the community have a propensity for crossing borders for the economic purposes are vulnerable. The children who are children, including men and women, like boys and girls, and we have seen a lot of boys are getting taken across the borders, and they are forced into sometimes forced labor. And girls who are poor, and boys like get deceived by the peers, tricked by the peers, and traffickers also prey on them and take them. So the main women and children all are vulnerable, and who are poor, poorly educated, having less awareness, and living in a community who have a propensity of crossing borders for the purpose of work.
Trafficking, sex labor, and domestic servitude. Could you define them for us?
Yeah, forced labor means any work or service that is exacted from any person under the threat to loss or damage to life, liberty, right, property, or reputation of the person. In a single line, if a person is exploited in a forced labor condition, that is forced trafficking. And servitude means the condition or the obligation to work to render services from which the person cannot escape and which he cannot prevent or alter. And and prostitution, prostitution means the sexual exploitation or abuse of any person for commercial purpose, or for consideration in money or kind. So it's according to the law. This is how the prostitution, forced labor, and servitude are defined.
Now, can you explain the U.S. State Department trafficking in person, the TIP tier ranking list?
Yeah, so as you know, the TVPA, Trafficking Victim Protection Act, was passed by the Congress in 2000, and that mandates the annual report by the U.S. State Department, and they review the actions of 187 countries annually, and they categorize the countries in tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 1 means countries whose governments fully comply with the TVPA minimum standards, and tier 2 countries whose governments do not fully comply with the TVPA's minimum standards, but are making significant efforts to bring themselves into compliance with those standards. Tier 2 watch list is countries whose governments do not fully comply with the TVPA minimum standards, but are making significant efforts to bring themselves into compliance with those standards. And there is a tier 3 in which countries whose governments do not fully comply with the minimum standards are not making significant efforts to do so. As you know, the section 108 of the TVPA Act mandates the reports, and it's a very good standard and resource for countries like Bangladesh to comply with, and it really helps to maintain the minimum standard for everything, like for 4Ps: prevention, protection, prosecution, and partnership for combating trafficking in person.
Now, what might be the reasons that cause migrant workers to pursue work abroad?
So there is multiple driving factors. There was a recent research conducted by IOM, and they have seen like the aspiration is the main key. And as I earlier mentioned, the main worker young person, and who are poorly educated, because we have seen around 33% are really poorly educated, and 75%, I guess, was complete the 10th standard, but they're still aspirant to work in abroad. So the economic condition, their aspiration, ambitions, their community pressures, peer pressures, and in many families, we have seen that the young person who is really aspiring to go abroad for working purpose, having the other family members or community members working abroad. So these are the main key factors that are driving our young generation. And when they were asked, why do you want to go abroad for work? And they were saying, like, if they don't have any employment opportunities for them in country, to engage with. That is why they want to migrate out for the purpose of work. So there is a multiple driving factors, and main thing is that there is the money they want to earn doesn't match with their skills that they have to be employed in countries. So that is why for example, for a daily laborer job here per day it's 400 maximum, but in other countries probably it's more than that. That is why they wish to migrate out to earn fortune for their families. And there is a lot of examples that people from their community migrated out and did really well, built a good house, living a good life. So that really encouraged them to migrate out.
Now, can you talk about how local traffickers lure victims into crossing the border, and what kind of tactics do they use?
So the tactics are, they use kind of change. It keeps changing. So they have a lot of tactics, starting from the abduction, for false love affairs. They normally befriend and prey on them. Fake marriage. They do they don't register, but first trick her into a love affair, then do a fake marriage and then take them beyond the border. Sometimes children and get allured into some other enticement like chocolates, tourism, travel, a lot of things. So, and when the community people are out of a certain tactics of a trafficker, so they just change to other tactics. So there's a lot of tactics they use, and normally they don't play by rules. So whatever they need, they use the tactics. The common tactics are the love affair, fake marriage, and good job offer in destination, which doesn't match with the skills of a potential victim. Like then offer, for example, one potential victim is working at a government factory, and one recruiter who is deployed as a decoy worker as her peer, put pressure and try pursue her, saying that the same work you do in Mumbai will get 50,000 per month. Same work you do in Libya or Jordan, you will get 50,000 per month. So these are the tactics that commonly used by the traffickers for preying on the potential victims.
Now you mentioned this a little bit, but how do traffickers bring victims of trafficking across the border? And can you describe the use of land, air, and sea routes for Bangladesh, given the complex geography there?
Yeah, thanks. So they use all ways to take the victims out of the country. So, for example, if one girl is taken to Libya and then they get exploited there, so the girl is taken through formal documents like passport, visas, and everything. Then when she arrives in the destination areas, they end up in a trafficking situation. She gets sold off to other networks for the purpose of exploitation. If female in commercial sexual exploitation for the commercial purposes, and if male in forced labor condition. Here in cross-border trafficking context, the girls are taken by land, and normally they cross into India illegally. So, and they use the local brokers and local networks to ensure the safe passing into India. And sometimes the male victims are taken by sea routes, as you might come across the scenario. Then they get recruited and taken to the other destination by sea route, using the sea route. So they use everything. So since, as I told you, they don't play by rules, so they just want to get their things done. So they use air route, land port, and sea routes for the purpose of trafficking.
What kind of work are victims typically get placed into when they reach their destination?
So it depends in the destination country. If one male victim is taken to Malaysia, so normally they force into a kind of agricultural farming, or some in remote places. In other Middle Eastern countries, they normally put in a difficult job where they don't find normal workers to work in. So that so it depends on the destination areas. In India, if the girl is taken to, normally they are placed in the commercial sex industry and they get forced into prostitution. If a child is taken into India, then normally they force into brick lane and other bangle factories, where the the work is really dangerous and hazardous for the children, and they don't find normally worker to do that. In Jordan, normally they get they get trafficked into a servitude, like as a domestic help, and get exploited. Normally they get sold into multiple networks. So it depends on the destination countries where they're normally placed and where the victims are exploited. And it different from country to country.
Differs from country to country. How have past victims you've seen escape from their captors?
So normally in India, we have seen like a couple of victims who escaped, right? Just ran away from the trafficking situation and got rescued by police. And we have seen the couple of rescues happen while police was tipped off by organization like us or organization in India. In other countries like Libya and other countries and Malaysia, normally the police is informed by Bangladesh police if a case is lodged here, police case, then the tip-off is given to the destination areas police agencies, and then they get rescued. In some cases, we have seen that the Bangladesh High Commission in destination areas prompted an action, then the victim was rescued. So normally the victims are not able to run away in normal cases. They get rescued by police when they're tipped off.
Now you mentioned the repatriation process. What exactly is it?
Then again, it depends on the destination country's laws as well. Between Bangladesh and India, though there is no standardized process, but there is an agreed MOU between Bangladesh and India, and they follow a certain process, though it's not uniform as of now. Every state's following their own standard operating procedure. For example, from Maharashtra, if any Bangladeshi victim has to be repatriated from Maharashtra, they have their own SOPs, and Bangladesh has their own process to support the repatriation process. Normally, when a victim gets rescued over there, and then normally we get intimated about the rescue by the shelter home authorities. So we identify the families first, then we put in an application, and kind of intimation to the Minister of Home Affairs to do the nationality verification of that victim who is rescued in India. Then Bangladesh Minister of Home Affairs do the nationality verification through their own channel, and they issue a repatriation order addressing the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, and then the repatriation order is sent to the respective High Commission. Then we also send the repatriation order to our counterparts. Then Indian counterparts, get the ANOCs that they require to send a foreign national back to the country of origin, and then there is a date fixed between the border guards and BSF, and then the victim is brought to the border. Then the handover happens. In country like Middle Eastern countries and Malaysia, normally there is no standardized process for repatriation. It's normally they get deported. Deported means with a travel permit issued by the Bangladesh High Commission. They just board on a train and they come back, and then they get reunified with their families. But here between Bangladesh and India, it's a little bit of kind of a we follow a sensitive process, which is victims sensitive. So we take over the victims, then we reunify them with the families. We call them and reunify them. We also do a risk assessment of the families where they are getting reunified with, and also the community, and then we support them. So it depends, the repatriation process between the countries, but it's more structured between Bangladesh and India, but it's not that way, have taken any shape between other countries, other destination countries, and with Bangladesh.
Sounds like a complicated process here. I'd imagine victims will face challenges even after they escaped. Can you talk about those challenges victims face when it comes to reintegration?
Yeah, the major challenge is the stigma. So when a woman and girl are brought back, like repatriated back into the communities, the first thing they face is stigma from the community. And I've seen the girls are facing stigma from their own family, even after they're warmly welcomed by the family. And they face normally, rebuild their lives. So they have daily challenges, and it's really difficult. Normally girls who get trafficked, having very poor skills to, rebuild their lives. So, and then they've, face daily stresses from the community. So normally they give up after a certain period of time, and then normally, they get sometimes remigrate and re-trafficked as well. And for male victims, I guess they get traumatized, and also the, female, woman and child, they get also traumatized, and getting them out of trauma is a challenge, and we have a very scarcity of the trained counselor in a decentralized manner. And for the male victims, when they come back, they normally they don't have any options to rebuild their life. So it's really challenging for them to rebuild their life when they're back in the community. So the major challenges are stigma, lack of skills, lack of employment opportunities, and lack of institutional support are the more challenges that the victims of trafficking faces when they're back in the community.
Now, the important question here is, why is there such a low rate of prosecution of traffickers in Bangladesh?
Yeah, it's a really important question. And in 2019, 18, I guess, the prosecution conviction rate was 0.4% out of the total case disposed in that year. And then it was, in 2019, it was 1.27%. So look at the type of the crimes, transnational and often cross-border. And recently we have reviewed 200 trafficking cases pending trial, and we have seen the 80% of those cases are of cross-border nature. So when the investigation was conducted, it was conducted in-house. So, and when we got the judge's perspective, they were saying like evidence of rescue of the victim in destination areas are really key to prove the case in the court of law, and which was missing in most of the charge sheets that were submitted. So access to the foreign evidence by the investigation was a challenge, and there was a difficulty. That is why the evidence was not brought back and attached to the charge sheet. And these are the main reasons that the cases are not disposed in conviction. We need to have substantial evidence, including country of origin and country of destination. So, and we have, I mentioned earlier, we have a mutual legal assistance treaty with India, but we have not taken any advantage of the provision of those treaty, and we have not ensured that the IO investigation officers have their access to the evidence lying in the foreign land. So I would say that the lack of evidence to prove the case in the court of law is the major reason, one of the major reasons for the low rate of conviction in the human trafficking cases. And again, the victim witness protection is not there. Normally when the victim is back and the FIR is lodged, they normally traffickers intimidate the victims, and then they settle the case out of the court. Normally victims become reluctant to support the prosecutor when the trial starts. So witness protection is another big reason for this low conviction rate in the human trafficking cases, and the evidence and witness protection. And again, I would say of course the transnationality of the case is a major reason. So if you look at the type of the cases, there is a few 10 or 15% cases are internal trafficking, like in which the victim was rescued in India, and the motive was to exploit the victim within the country. So that is why the conviction rate is really low. And it's a lot of reason. Another reason, like the skill of the investigation officer to investigate into this such special crime is really, the investigation officer really lacking that skills. And also our prosecutors need to be more proactive and more skillful again to, pursue the justice for the victim in the court of law. So these are the major reasons, but we have a very good international standard law here to prosecute the criminals. And if we are able to bridge this gap, I'm quite sure the conviction rate will increase substantially.
Now we're going to move on to the tribunal system. So what is the human trafficking tribunal system in Bangladesh, and what is its current status?
So the law, Human Trafficking Prevention Suppression Act 2012 is a special law. So if there is a special law, there is a special court to try these cases. So that is why the law mandates the setup of a special courts to try these, to try the criminals, and try the crimes committed under this law. So, and though we have another tribunal, as a prevention of oppression against women and children tribunal. So since we had lack of logistical facilities, so the women and children tribunal used to perform additional duty as a human trafficking prevention tribunal. Now there is a recent government has recently established 8 tribunals in 8 divisional headquarters, but it doesn't mean that the tribunal will cover the entire divisional districts. Like normally we have 10 districts under a divisional. The divisional headquarters tribunal will cover this one district where the court is located. But again, government has a plan to establish the tribunals in every district, especially in districts where the trafficking rate is high.
Can you describe how and why victims will become traffickers themselves?
Yeah, so see, the rescue time is really important in human trafficking cases. If the victim is not rescued within the standard time, like within 6 months, 3 months, then the victims is really, they're sucked into the criminal network, and they're told, they see like, there is no one to rescue us, so better we, compromise and, and work for the criminals, since I have left with no choice. And if I cooperate with the traffickers and the network, then I can earn money and rebuild my life. So that is that kind of, orientation they're given by the criminal network, and then they get used as a recruiter for the criminal network. So this is how we have seen the victims turn trafficker. And when they're back, they recruit a couple of more girls and, take back. And I've seen like in labor trafficking cases, male, get exploited once, get deported, and then recruit some other, potential victims and, send them back to the destination where she or he was exploited. So this is how, victim turned trafficker, where the, rescue response time is really key. If the victim is rescued within a very, standard time, I've never seen the victims turn trafficker.
What do we know about the trafficking leaderships? Now, some of the most notorious ones being the godfathers, kingpins, and the main trafficker. What do we know about their leaderships?
So, as you know, it's the OCG, organized criminal group, and they're very organized, and and they take the advantage of the lack of coordination between the countries, like between the source, transit, and destination countries. So there is no coordination. So and they take the advantage. Well, they are very much organized. Normally, in cross-border cases, the kingpins sit in the destination areas where they run the business and employ their recruiters in the country of origin to recruit the potential victims. So, and what we have seen that the investigation rarely go up to the kingpin. So normally, kingpins are not touched. Kingpins of the criminal group are not touched. They stay somewhere above the what should I say, like the coverage of the investigation. So they stay above. We have seen rarely the kingpins are prosecuted. So, and there is a lot of, and since as you know, the trafficking is a very highly profiting illegal business. So there is a lot of good people involved. I would not say on record that who might be involved in this criminal network, but there's a lot of good people we know are involved in this criminal process. And recently we have seen in Bangladesh a choreographer and a recruiting agent who used to send people, in destination countries legally were found involved in this, criminal network. So they were doing the trafficking, so still, it needs to be explored in a proper manner to identify the ringleader and godfathers, to identify those, unless it's, we do that, it's not going to stop. So still, we have to investigate further to identify the main godfather ringleaders who are, leading this criminal network.
Sounds like there are a lot of great areas or, for, prosecution for human trafficking. Now, what are the 4 Ps, those being prevention, protection, prosecution, and partnership? What are they?
Yeah, it's normally the US State Department advocated for these 4Ps. Earlier it was 3P, prevention, protection, and prosecution. Then our Honorable Hillary Clinton, then in her regime, she proposed this 4P. I guess, that is what I told by the State Department. Then we started, doing that. So, but the 4Ps are really critical to combat this trafficking. So prevention is key, factor in combating human trafficking. Protection is really required for the victims, and there should be protection mechanism. Prosecution is another critical area where if the criminals are not prosecuted, it's not going to stop. So they need to have a kind of a, understanding that if I do this crime or commit this crime, I will prosecute it. And partnership is really key. Without partnership, without collaboration, we cannot combat the crime like human trafficking, since it's organized and transnational. So we need to have our partner in the other side of the border, and we need to collaborate. Like, I'm not supposed to investigate, so I have to collaborate with the investigation officer. The investigation officer is not supposed to prosecute the criminal, so they have to collaborate with the prosecutor, and the prosecutor with the judges. So, and we have to, collaborate with the other stakeholders upon the victims and for the aftercare. So it's about it's all about the partnership. So the 4Ps are really key, and the organizations who are working in the sector, trying to, working in these sectors to combat the human trafficking persons effectively.
Investigation and collaboration, a combination, is very important. Now, finally, what solutions should developing countries like Bangladesh focus on in fighting human trafficking?
So first thing is that in prevention, context, we have to ensure the areas where lacking the employment opportunities. We have to create the economic opportunities for the vulnerable families, so that their the economic capacity increase and their vulnerability reduce, vulnerability to the human trafficking, and they are financially able to, and the information has to be disseminated to those areas so that people are aware of human trafficking, and they're able to make informed decision with regard to their potential, migration for the purpose of work. Secondly, in protection in developing countries, we need to have institutional facilities for the victims. We need to adopt victim-centric and trauma-informed facilities for the victims of human trafficking, so that the victims, stay in their comfort when they, try to access the services that they require. And in prosecution, the collaboration has to be there, and there should be a collaboration between the country of source, transit, and destination, so that the traffickers who are operating, for example, if a trafficker being a Bangladeshi national operating the criminal network being based in India, if there is a collaboration between Bangladesh and India, then that trafficker will not be spared. So if there is an information, then if there is a coordination between the investigation agencies, then the trafficker can be arrested in Bangladesh if he is absconding from India. So the collaboration needs to be established between the countries of source, transit, and destination. And again, partnership has to be established within the sector and beyond this sector to ensure the prevention is, well prepared, targeted, and effective, and the protection is well standardized, and really catering to the need of the victims, and investigation is done in a proper manner. So that is why what we need to look at for the developing countries like Bangladesh to work on to fight these trafficking persons effectively.
Mohammad Islam, Country Director of Justice and Care Bangladesh, an NGO that helps support victims of slavery and human trafficking. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, and thank you for connecting me.